Hi, I'm Tom Eschen, the host of Power and Politics, the conversation about the issues that are impacting you the most with the people that are making those decisions and the advocates too, holding them accountable along the way. Today we sit down with New York's Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado on the heels of his announcement that he won't be on the ticket for Governor Hochul's re-election bid in 2026. Of course, we ask him why he's made that decision, why he's made it now, and why he says all options are on the table and what options those potentially could be. We also get into other conversations around affordability and the federal government's policies impacting New Yorkers right now. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, you can listen to the Power and Politics podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and also on YouTube at CBS 6 Albany. Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado joins us today. Thanks so much for coming on, Governor.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's begin with the elephant in the room, if you will. Yesterday, on Monday evening, you tweeted out, sent out on social media, you made the decision not to run for re-election with the governor. Why?
I think it's very important right now to be an independent voice, to be able to connect directly with folks all across the state, and to do so in a way where I'm only accountable to them. That I am in a position to speak freely. One of the things that I've noticed as I traveled across the state is there's a real distrust right now for government, for elected officials across the political spectrum. And in large part, I understand why. I think the status quo is broken. And I think where we are right now politically is an incredibly divisive moment. And it's important for leaders to step up, to demonstrate where their allegiance lies. And for me, it's very, very important for New Yorkers to know that I am their voice, that I want to be their voice, and that is the only thing that I am beholden to, is the people. And being in a position where I can display that and speak freely at a time of real crisis, both for the state and for the country, I think is very important to do.
You talk about being beholden to the people, and I think that's really interesting. You were on with David Lombardo, the Capitol Press Room, a few weeks ago and spoke, I think, in the light of, at that point, you had recently called for Eric Adams to resign. And you mentioned all of the distrust and what the people believe politicians could be beholden to. You listed lobbyists, yes. Big funding, corporations, things of that nature. And you say you're beholden to the people. What people?
All. When I ran for Congress back in 2018, which feels like a lifetime ago now, the big reason why I ran, and I said this in my statement, is I felt like we needed more leaders who were accountable to the people, all people, irrespective of race, gender, sexual orientation, party affiliation, everyday folks, not big business, not big corporations, not money, not power, actual human beings with families who get up every single day and try to put food on their table and look out for their kids. That's what we need to be focused on. And the emergence of Trump back in 2016, like many folks, awakened in me this belief, this understanding that something is going wrong here from where I sat. Why is it that our system is such that an individual who in my mind doesn't truly care about the people, but is able to feed on their fears and anxieties, has been able to emerge? What does that say about those of us who haven't stepped up? So I did step up. But what I've learned over the last 7, 8 years is Trump was in many respects the byproduct of a broken status quo. Yes, he's a problem, and he's a big problem, but the underlying dynamics have been in place for a very long time. And those dynamics are ones where you have a system of government that is basically beholden to moneyed interests and corporate power, consolidated corporate power. And as that consolidated power continues to grow, elected officials become extensions of that power as opposed to extensions of the people. And this is across the political spectrum. And so for that reason, I look at where we are now in the landscape and I say to myself, what are we doing as those of us who care about public service to make sure that we are cutting through that noise and reassuring the public, everybody in the public, that we care about them and not about those who happen to have the means to access us. By the way, fewer and fewer of those folks have the means to access power.
You referenced Trump there, but you are declaring independence here from the rest of this ticket, which you have been on. That would lead some to believe that the other side of this ticket, and that would be the governor, doesn't necessarily align with what you just said and is beholden to something else. Is that true?
I'm speaking for myself, and I think that's an important point. This is bigger than our dynamic. This is the overarching systemic political reality of our times. We are literally in the middle of a moral existential crisis right now. There's a complete lack of faith in our very institutions. And when you look at the way Trump is currently able to be so destructive to our system, I think it is symptomatic of the disease, which is a loss of faith in our democracy. The fact that he can talk so brazenly about destroying agencies that have been congressionally created, the fact he can be so brazen to disregard court orders, the fact he could be so brazen to basically say, I'm going to impound congressionally appropriated funding. And on top of that, the fact we have folks in Congress, in his own party, who make it their business to say, our president deserves the speaker he wants. Last time I checked, Congress is a co-equal branch of government. So why are they bending the knee to an individual who's not a member of Congress? It's an entirely separate branch of government. And last time I checked, the judicial branch is a separate branch of government. So when I speak about the times we're living in right now, I'm speaking about those larger dynamics where we have destruction happening all around our institutions, and that destruction has been rendered permissible by the behavior of elected officials and the behavior of our system across decades. We didn't have to be in this position right now. Did not have to be in this position at all.
Whose fault is that?
A lot of people's fault in leadership.
Is it the Democrat Party?
Democrats have
right now,
the
the Republicans.
The Democrats
have
a big part of the blame, because we're the ones who talk about working families. We're the ones who talk about making sure that we protect folks who are trying to get by every single day, put food on their table. We're the ones talking about making sure we want everybody to have a shot at getting ahead. We want that small business owner to find their own journey, their own path to financial freedom. We want that little child growing up in any community, from a rural community to an urban community, to have a chance to make a way and be whatever their dreams might be. We want to make sure people have access to real, affordable health care that they can rely on and not get cheated on by insurance companies, right? We're the ones who champion these things. We say we're for labor, right? And so, okay, but when you look at the numbers and you look at what's been happening over the last 20, 30 years or so, economic inequality has grown. Under our watch, too, it has grown. The top 1% right now own more wealth than the entire middle class. Two-thirds of folks in our country, paycheck to paycheck. They're living paycheck to paycheck right now in our country. So when you talk about our policies, well, how are they actually affecting people's lives? They're not, because they're not reaching people's lives. What did we do at that period of time? We started playing the game within the game. We took our eyes off the people and focused on party politics and hierarchy within our party, and said, how do I make sure that I relate appropriately to those within my party or special interests or the donor class, and not give as much attention to the people as they deserve?
There's been some criticism of the Democratic Party by some Republicans and others within the party itself that the party went too woke. I guess like that's the word they use now to describe that, and it can be used now for different connotations. I think you're aware of that. And now you see DEI being stripped back by the Republican Party as well. My question is the party at almost in jeopardy of moving too far away from representing those that don't have that voice in trying to make this change to speak to a wider demographic?
Here's where
there are populations that have been misrepresented. Because I think about this in the context, I just want to make sure you understand, is you look at what bail reform in New York State in 2019, and now there were some questions at how Raise the Age has been implemented, discovery reform. Those are all put in place to help speak for, from what I understand from my conversations, for those that didn't, black and brown population, that didn't have as much.
Yes.
And now they have been rolled back over the course of the last 5 years. Do you think rolling things like that back are going in the right or wrong direction?
I think where you started the question, right? where have we drifted as a party? The question is, where have we drifted away from? Not necessarily where we have drifted to, it's what have we drifted away from? And as we have decided to partner all of our objectives, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in housing, whether it's in childcare, whether it's in education, you name it, all of these public goods, things that really are meant to set the floor for economic security across race, across gender, right? If that's the baseline that we set, what happens when you set all these public goods and tether them to pure private profit-driven motives? Every single solution that we've come up with, more or less, over the last 30 or 40 years as Democrats is about a private partnership that is dictated on the terms of profiteering. But yet government, last time I checked, is not a private investor. And who does that affect? It affects all communities. As someone who at one time represented a rural community, a 90% white rural community a district that Trump won by 7 points, I could speak about the ways in which when you are a private investor model and you look for densely populated areas to get your return on investment in things, well, who are you going to overlook? Rural, poor white, working class communities that are still struggling to have broadband access in the 21st century, that are still struggling to have cell service in the 21st century, that are dealing with closures of hospitals because of hospital consolidation, or our small family-owned farms who are dealing with the big ag and the monopolies that go on there. This is the issue. We have stopped figuring out how to connect people's loss of economic security, be they white, be they black, be they brown, whatever their background is. We have stopped talking about it in a way that connects their pain in a meaningful way, and then implementing policies that ultimately speak to that pain and solve for it. So the other dynamics are always going to be in play, but they become a lot more salient to folks or a lot more relevant to people's lives when at the same time they're wrestling through these challenging dynamics, they're still trying to figure out where the economic security is.
You speak to the corporates and the consolidation of corporate in the past, the corporate America in New York State, and tax subsidies in which, I guess, enhance them, if you could say, their bottom line. How do you continue to invest in and promote and keep businesses and corporations in this state that could provide an economic impact, but at the same time limit what the benefits they have from staying here? How do you balance that line?
Because I feel like this is the narrative. Well, we need to throw billions of dollars at big corporations and big industries that are doing just fine without them. Studies, you can look at countless studies that show that the return on investment for New Yorkers, for everyday folks, the impact that they feel based on these investments, hard to find, hard to come by in many cases. Yep. While at the same time, if you invest in things like early childhood development, we know, studies show, that the return on investment is incredibly high. So why is it that we continue to just invest, or not even invest, subsidize, right, corporate action in this fashion, when we know what New York has to offer these corporations? You don't think these corporations know what New York has to offer with all of our population, with all of our diversity? This is New York, man. Come on. The attraction is there. The draw is there. The demand across the state is plentiful. If you do business, you want to be able to sell your businesses, your goods, your services in New York. You want to. And so, listen, I worked in the private sector. I worked at a corporate law firm. So it's not that I'm against corporations or against business. I am. I feel like it's important to have economic drivers. It's important to make sure we create employment across all different sectors. And I'm a capitalist. I believe in the dynamism of capitalism. But let's be clear. We cannot allow it to just go unchecked. We can't let the profit motive dictate every decision that we make. Government has a responsibility to invest in public goods, to create a floor. The profit motive, the so-called invisible hand, doesn't give a damn about working people. You know why? Because the invisible hand doesn't see them. It can't touch them. It's the mindset of the public servant that has to do that work. Be with the people, connect with the people, engage with the people. So on that point, you take those resources that would have otherwise been used to prop up corporations that don't need it, and you reallocate those resources in our high needs communities, in our distressed communities, in our communities that are being left behind. And think about this too. Small business generation, the ability to actually start your own business, has fallen off a cliff. That's financial freedom for families. Why has that happened? Because of the consolidation of corporations. There's no room for folks to go about their lives and chase whatever dream they have. So if you're an American, if you're a New Yorker trying to figure this all out, where's the answer? And who's it coming from?
One of the answers you had was early childhood investment. And I think it was almost 2 years ago, we spoke at I think it was some sort of dinner or lunch or brunch about this topic specifically. Is that one of those answers universal child care? Is it more, because I've spoken with many in this advocacy line that say this is an underfunded, misrepresented sector that we're missing out on, which you're speaking to right now, because you look at some of these, you have child tax credit proposals in this budget and things of that nature, and getting on the path to universal child care, but at the same time, there's no workforce there. Where is the funding coming? And do you have enough? I mean, people talk about spending in the state all the time. Do you have enough to go around to be able to invest in this?
There's money to go around because, again, let's track where the money is going. Let's just start where the money is going. And are we getting a return on that investment? If we're not getting a return on that investment, let's put the money where we know we can. And yes, we need to get to universal child care. We need it on so many different levels. Listen, I'm a father. I have twin boys, 11-year-old twin boys. I love them to death. It is hard to manage childcare. I speak from personal experience. It is very hard financially to manage it. From an access standpoint, it's hard to manage it. It is just difficult. I can empathize with a lot of young families out there who are going through it every single day.
It costs a lot of money.
And it costs
a
tremendous amount of money. Yeah. It keeps parents home. That burden disproportionately falls on mothers for obvious reasons that have to do with misogyny in our culture and norms that have over time we have to continue to wrestle with. But the fact of the matter is, both in terms of an economic standpoint, in terms of an equity standpoint, in terms of a child development standpoint, there are so many gains we can make with universal child care. And you're right, the biggest issue is making sure that we are paying folks a wage that reflects the value of the work. We got CEOs right now making damn near 300 times more than the average worker. CEOs 300 times more. And we got care providers lucky if they make a few dollars more than the minimum wage. Let that sink in. Care providers, people who look out for our children, our future, making just a few more dollars if they're lucky than the minimum wage. I don't think that's something that we should be tolerating anymore. We never should have.
Why isn't the political will there to do it? Because we've seen Band-Aids, you could say, over the course of the past few years. We've seen bonuses, but nothing. I know that some lawmakers are advocating for a fund dedicated to this.
I think that's the kind of thinking we need. We need to be bold. The tinkering around the edges, let's try to, see if we can make this work and fit this with that. None of that adds up to anything in the end. It just is like punting the ball. You just push it down, kick the can, and nothing really ever materializes. I'm tired of studies. We got enough studies. We don't need any more studies. We don't need task force. We don't need them. We need action. We need legislative action. We need executive implementation. That's what we need. And when you say, well, what's the delay? What's the delay? That's a really good question, And I don't know. I don't want to speak for other actors. I don't know. I can just say that from where I sit, it's important that we have leadership that understands what the mission is for him or her, right? What is it you want to accomplish? What are you trying to get done? I know that universal child care needs to get done. And I know that we need to be able to bring a broad coalition to the table to make sure we get it done legislatively, in a fashion that can really impact people's lives. It's long overdue.
You talk about how much in this sector individuals are paid. Let's pivot now, because when you said that, I thought about what's going on across the state right now, and that's the prison workers striking. And this, I think part of this began during a couple weeks ago when the DOCS commissioner testified at the budget hearing, and Republican lawmakers were asking why they are paid $52,000 a year to begin. And I think, as we both know, that's not an easy job.
Not at all.
And it's also, I should say, and from the individual I spoke to, they're frustrated at the timing of these strikes as well because of the confluence with the charges being released about Robert Brooks. So I want to make sure we separate those two topics.
We should.
And make sure that we're fair to both sides. But I do want to start there at the reform and what's going on across the state when it comes to these prison workers. Do you think it's being handled efficiently, quickly enough? This has been going on almost 2 weeks now.
So today, I was in Coxsackie, Greene County. I used to represent Greene County when I was in Congress. I know the sheriff there very well, Sheriff Kosminski. He and I have been talking. I said, listen, I want to talk to some folks. I want to talk to some COs, their families. Can you pull a group together so I could just have a conversation and just get a better understanding of what the real issues are? Retirees, active, family members, about 30, 40 people showed up at the sheriff's office. Was able to have a real conversation. You mentioned wages. You mentioned, time off, or these things are, important.
Right, they're understaffed. They're saying that
right, understaffed,
shifts, that kind of thing. Yeah.
And you're right. Those things we discussed. But the biggest thing is the safety piece. They're concerned. They're concerned about their safety and welfare, particularly when you tie it into the amount of time they're being expected to work. Sometimes 24-hour shifts. That's an insanely long period of time for any type of job, let alone a job where you are under constant mental stress and strain. And one of the things that they really want more than anything, based on my conversation, is to be heard, is to be accounted for and listened to. Now, I'm not excusing, nor am I suggesting that what they're doing is legal, right? There's a certain process you're supposed to take when you want to go on strike and enforce your labor and collective bargaining. But they are going to extreme measures. They really are. And there were two women in the room. Both were wives, and their husbands worked as correction officers. And they were talking about how their husbands walked away. And in doing so, gave up their health care benefits, gave up their wages. And one of them actually broke down in tears because she was trying to communicate to me how deep this is for her and her family and how undervalued the COs feel. The other piece that I want to flag for you that I don't think everybody fully understands, the safety dynamics that are being spoken about here also implicate the incarcerated individuals who are doing everything in their power the right way, right? Who just want to get through their bid, who want to,
Well, neither of them want to be there. Right?
No.
It is the correctional officer's job. They're getting paid.
But there are elements that they're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
They just are. This is a jail cell.
Yeah.
This is a prison. So you're going to have elements, right, in that population, within that general population, that the question becomes deterrence. And what are the means to deter them? Right? What are the tools at the CEO's disposal? Right? And I think what they want to have is a conversation about that. They want to feel like they're not being put in a position where they're being overly exposed to potential harm. And the piece that I want to stress is, and I learned this again when I was in Congress, the most important thing leaders need to do in these moments is listen. You got to show up. You got to be present. You got to listen to people and understand where they're coming from. Not to justify it, but to understand it and to figure out if there's a way forward. I think that's the piece that's what I was trying to do in my discussion. It was about an hour 15, 20-minute conversation. And I found it very instructive because I think it's important for folks to understand that these are individuals who are putting themselves, they're taking an extreme measure here. And as a father, the first thing I ask myself is, well, if I'm putting food at my kid's table, I'm taking food out of my kid's mouth if I don't go to work. What would make me do that?
Yeah.
What would make me do that? And I think that's an important piece that we have to be able to wrestle with.
Let's flip that then. If you were the father of Robert Brooks,
Yes.
how would you feel?
Horrible, angry. I'm not his father, but I feel it nonetheless. And I want to be clear, you rightfully said, this is separate. These are not, I mean, they're related to some degree, I guess, because it's all overlapping, the timeline and those dimensions, right? So I think it's very important to not have this conversation in a way where we're conflating dynamics. Everything I just said about the safety of those officers and the incarcerated individuals who are just trying to get through their time, that's one bucket of the conversation. What happened to Mr. Brooks and the manner in which that type of behavior, that level of violence was on full display. It was a window into a reality that, but for those cameras, we would have never even seen. It pains me. It does. It pains me to know, and the accountability has to be at an all-time high there. There's nothing about what happened on that video, in my estimation, that can be at all somehow justified or rationalized around whatever's going on as it pertains to the conditions that our COs are dealing with. Those two things don't go hand in hand. I talked to enough folks in law enforcement, whether it's state troopers, whether it's police officers, whether it's COs, enough of them across the board, of all backgrounds, all races, to a person. No one tries to justify what the hell happened in that video. Have you found anybody?
No.
Exactly. So let's not be in the business of trying to marry these two worlds. They're not in that way. We can have a conversation about holding those officers accountable to the fullest extent of the law, and then figuring out what are the conditions, right, that are breeding that type of behavior.
Right, I was going to
right?
ask, because
that
it's
might
been
be
described as, to me, by formerly incarcerated and advocates, that there is a culture of abuse, and this time it got caught on camera.
But
and
that's
this time
okay.
it went
But
over the line.
you're not speaking to what I'm speaking to. You're speaking to the culture of abuse. That's separate and apart from the culture we were just talking about, which was the culture of a number of COs across our prison system.
Right. Yeah, I understand
not
that.
feeling
Yeah.
safe.
Right.
Right. So there's safety issues, and then there's another dynamic that you're now introducing into the conversation around a culture of abuse and how incarcerated individuals are being treated behind closed doors. And we need a lot more sunlight on that. We need a lot more accountability on that. We need the video cameras. We need responsible leadership. We need responsible oversight. And that is absolutely imperative. No question about it. You see what I'm doing? You have to break the conversation up.
It's difficult because
It is,
they
but
are the same people. I shouldn't conflate
not-
all the prison workers as the ones that are part of this culture, but I should say correctional officers are the ones that killed Robert Brooks. Those that are in that field.
Individuals did that are correctional
Right.
officers. But don't say correctional officers as if the
Those
culture of being a correctional officer killed him. No. Individuals whose job is our correction officers did what they did. Not the role of being or the culture of. Now, there could be elements that had something to do with that we need to be speaking to and address. There's no question about that. But see, I like that we're having this kind of conversation because it doesn't happen enough. We need to be able to have a thoughtful conversation about things that allows us to air out all the different complexities of an issue. But what's happening right now in our system, within media, within the papers, within our politics, is what's the headline? What is the narrative that I can grab onto to create controversy? And that obviously feeds what? The algorithms, right? And it feeds what? The advertisements. And it all comes back to what? The profit motive. You know what else is a public good? Public information is a public good. Facts are public goods. But what happens when you allow facts and the airing out of public information to be co-opted by private corporate interests? What happens is we don't have any objective reference point as a society anymore. What happens is we get siloed communication and everything gets reinforced in an echo chamber. So even the ability to have a thoughtful conversation, a point of disagreement, is rendered futile. It can't happen. But here's what leadership matters. Leadership figures out a way to pull folks together, to hold themselves accountable, and by extension the people accountable, and say, come on guys, let's have a real conversation. I want to say this on this point too. When I ran for Congress in 2018, I did it in a district that was 1/3 independent, 1/3 Republican, 1/3 Democrat. So 2/3 of my district did not share my party affiliation. Now, that meant I made my bones as a political actor in a district where I had to learn very quickly that it was more important to listen to folks and where they were coming from than it was to just talk at them. And this is where I think a lot of our public servants in politics across the country, and certainly here in New York, that tends to be missing. That ability to be willing to hear folks out from across the political spectrum without judgment, but with an objective to find common ground, feels to me like a lost art. And it's definitely no money in it, because all the money is going to conflict.
There's an element of transparency there.
Yes.
Right? And amongst, like you said, amongst elected officials. And I will ask you this because I've made some calls, shot some texts out after your announcement yesterday, and they did talk about your public schedule specifically and saying, I haven't seen as much from him. And I don't remember seeing anything about your meeting in Coxsackie. Is there a reason for that?
That just came together, the Coxsackie meeting. So fair point. Yeah. That just came together. Literally just thought to myself, you know what, we should make that happen. But we post our public schedule. You know, we don't, every single thing we do, like there's, you know, as with any person, right? You have a meeting here, a meeting there, like, but if it's a public facing event, or if I'm going out into the public, those are being posted. You know, that's always been the case. It's not hard to access, you know, where I am, what I've been doing. No, not an issue at all. But I hear you on the Coxsackie one because that just came together.
Right. I just use that as an example because I know, of course, the hate and the bias prevention, you've been working on that behind the scenes. And I think that's been some of the questions around you specifically is what is his role here? What is he doing? And I think you look at the governor's statement and how she said that some things have been neglected and she's reallocating resources. And we can talk about that as a whole, how you felt about her response to your announcement yesterday and along with the lines of what she said there.
I know my value. I know what I brought to the table. I know the work that I've done day in and day out, and the people that I've interacted with across this state know that work day in and day out. It's very important right now to understand that what matters the most to the folks in New York is not what is going on in some dynamic between me and the governor. What matters most is what's the plan for the future? What's the plan to protect New York and New Yorkers? What's the plan to feed our families, to make sure they can afford housing, afford health care? What's the plan to protect our immigrant community? What's the plan to ensure economic security? That's what people are talking about. So, for example, when I do my work as the head of the Office of Service and Civic Engagement, as I have been, and I travel the state, and I engage with nonprofit organizations, and I engage with educators, and I engage with students, and I engage with service providers who are feeding folks dealing with food insecurity, or people who are in need of clothing and shelter because even though they're working, they can't afford any of these basic needs. What I learned from this experience in that role as standing up this new Office of Service and Civic Engagement is that we're dropping the ball. That why is it we have to go the route of service to fill in the gaps at this point that are so wide, not even gaps anymore, they're just the norm. You know, when I was going out, we did a turkey giveaway over Thanksgiving. Lines around the block folks of all ages, all races, just to get food over the holidays. Why is that? And I asked all our service providers to say, is the trend line going in the wrong direction and into a person? Yes, it is. Delaware Opportunities, a community action agency up in Delaware County, was visiting with them not too long ago in my role as lieutenant governor, traveling the state, meeting folks where they are. They were terrified of the potential cuts coming down the pipeline with regards to Medicaid, education, Head Start. These are the things that people are sharing with me. And you know what they said to me? What's New York's plan? And listen, telling folks to call Congress, not a plan. A plan is saying, okay, here's how we're going to make sure we have revenue, how we're going to allocate that revenue. Here's how we're going to invest in our natural assets. We have farmers all across the state. Can we leverage them? If we're in a position where we have to account for cuts to SNAP, do we get food into our schools, into our hospitals, into those who need it, right? That's the kind of thinking right now we need when we're talking about a plan for New York. So for me, the work that I've done in that capacity, or the work that I've done standing up the different regional councils around hate and bias prevention, or the work that I've done as a chair of the Council on Community Justice, going into our prison systems and meeting with incarcerated individuals and COs, that work gives me a perspective that allows me to take all these diverse points of views and hear the shared pain that connects every single person across race and religion and ethnicity, and say, okay, what is the common thread here? Economic insecurity. The economic floor is falling out, even with hate and bias. You know, one of the reasons, and I'm not, again, rationalizing or excusing behavior of any kind when it comes to hate, but a big part of why people lose a sense of shared humanity and a sense of tolerance is when they don't feel secure in their economic status. And when you have leaders who make it their business to scapegoat others for those economic insecurities. Do you see how this works? It's a divide and conquer strategy. We see the economic system is broken. We see that more and more wealth is being captured by a few and by big corporations. We feel that the body politic, the population, the masses are unruly and unrest. How do we dilute the power? How do we dilute it? Well, we siphon them off. And we say, well, you feel this way because this group over here is taking this from you. And you feel this way because this group is not getting something that you could have gotten. Rather than saying, hey, what is this whole idea that we're all fighting for anyway? What is this illusion of scarcity that's been created in the first place? Who's creating this illusion of scarcity? And who among us in leadership is going to hold that to account? So this is a role for me that I cherish because it puts me with the people every single day. And it's about showing up with those people. It's about engaging with those people. It's about listening to those people. And then hopefully, as I did in Congress too, you want to take those fears, those concerns, those dreams, those aspirations, and you want to put that into policy. That isn't going to make everybody happy, by the way. Turns out being a leader means you got to upset some people. But hopefully those people understand that you're in it for the right reasons and that they give you the benefit of the doubt because they know your heart is in the right place.
You spoke to the federal policies and some of the things coming down from the Trump administration, Congress, Supreme Court, all the branches of government. Are you frustrated? Because I remember speaking with the governor, with legislative leaders after the budget, this proposal was sent out, and it triggered me because you talk about a plan. And I think a lot of the questions were, are you concerned about the fact that the budget doesn't make up for some of these shortfalls that would come from funding? And really the answer was, well, this is what you voted for. I want to make sure that the voters are held accountable, I guess, for lack of a better term. So I guess my question here is that, are you frustrated at all at the the response to some of these federal policies that have come down to the state of New York? You're frustrated with how the state has responded, how the governor's responded?
I'm definitely frustrated with the fact that we're being put in this position, first and foremost. We didn't have to be in this position. So that's frustrating.
What position of?
With literally Trump in the White House and Republicans controlling Congress. We didn't have to be in this position. That's number one, what I'm frustrated about. And you might say, well, why? Well, I already laid out the history behind where our party went wayward. But when I said Biden should step aside, that also speaks to my point. Our party played party politics instead of thinking about what the people needed in that moment. If we all thought Trump was as bad as he is, if we all really believed that, then why wouldn't we do more to give ourselves the best chance to prevent it from happening again? Why wouldn't we? If we really believed that. I believed it. And so that is why I spoke up when I spoke up. Despite whatever the impact might be on my political career. I could give a damn about my political career. And anybody who's in politics should have the same mentality. You should be willing to put your neck on the line, especially if you're going to paint the picture that the threat is as big as it is. And so, as you can tell, I'm frustrated because that's where a lot of it starts from. And if you go around the state and the country for that matter, and you talk to people, that's where a lot of the frustration comes from right now. And that's why you're not seeing as many people as you might have saw back in 2016 rush to the streets. Like you saw with the march, the Women's March, the indivisible groups. That energy is not where it needs to be right now because a lot of people feel like we dropped the ball, that we let them down. And now we want them to pick us back up? We let them down. And so it's up for us to stand up now and do that work and do it in a way that's going to help them overcome this situation. So that is the first part of being frustrated. Now, once you get past that part, the next part is, what are we doing, right?
What's next?
What are we doing at the state level? Because at the federal level, and I'm frustrated at the Republicans right now in Congress who are capitulating, by the way. They're capitulating to this guy. They don't even believe in separation of powers anymore. They don't believe in co-equal branches of government. They just want to do whatever they can. What they believe in is holding on to power by any means necessary. And they're willing to just give all their power to one individual. So I don't disagree. It is important to call bullshit on all those Republican leaders right now who call themselves public servants, who are put in those positions to actually serve the public, and they've given all that power to one man. So that's point two.
They say,
No.
and I've talked to them about this, they say this is what the American people voted for.
No, that's not what they voted for.
That's what their
The
argument
American
is.
people voted, if you believe in the Constitution, like I do, if you believe in democracy, like I do, people make these votes with an understanding, a basic framework of how our system is supposed to work. And anybody who understands the way our system works would know there are three branches of government, co-equal branches of government. Our founders, in their genius, understood you had to figure out how to separate power so that it is not concentrated in any one branch. So you can avoid what we fought a revolution over, monarchy. And so if that is what the design was meant for, so that we, the people, could give our power to this system and feel adequately represented by these branches and protected accordingly for the capture of power by any one individual who has no regard for the Constitution, no regard for the rule of law, no regard for judges, no regard for Congress's power. The people did not vote for that. What they voted for was figuring out a way to feel like they were being heard, figuring out a way to feel like they're being accounted for. And there's a destructive component to where we are right now. And I'm not justifying it in any way, shape, or form. No way, shape, or form is that type of energy in my mind warranted. Just like January 6th was unwarranted and disgusting. And the fact that he pardoned everybody blanket pardon for everybody should speak for itself and is utterly disqualifying, if you ask me. Unfit. Unfit. Did you hear that? You should not be able to pardon every single individual who beat violently law enforcement on the steps of our Capitol. Okay?
Serious, felony, seditious.
Yeah, but we're going to say, go ahead, go home, go free, knock yourself out. Let's form a choir about it and make it a joke, a damn joke. Really? So these are the things that I think people are witnessing and they're trying to understand. But the challenge is, the reason why that destructive energy is gained some ground here is because there's no uninhibited constructive energy. Everything on the other side of the equation is mealy-mouthed. Everything on the other side of the equation is poll tested. You know? Mm-hmm. everything is, what does so-and-so say? Huh? What do you think?
I think people know that I don't really believe in polls.
So I just think from that standpoint, we have to be willing as Democrats to break out of this box. And so we haven't fully got to the part about the state. The state needs to, at the same time, do whatever it needs to do, think outside of the box to make sure that we can sustain ourselves over the next, hopefully it's just 2 years until we take back the House. But what is our plan to sustain ourselves? We got a lot of folks relying on Medicaid in our state, millions of folks who rely on Medicaid, and we got billions of dollars being proposed, cuts. That's going to have a direct impact. What's the plan to address that?
So right now it appears the plan is lawsuits, right? I mean, I think I asked the question to the governor when I think it was under the guise of deportation, and I said, what is the plan to respond to this? And she said at that point it was lawsuits, and I asked if law enforcement or whatever could help protect people, and she said not at this time. Beyond the lawsuit, what can you do? Somebody
told me, first of all, lawsuits are appropriate, and we need to, leverage the law in every way, shape, or form. We need to enforce the law. We are a nation of laws. We need to enforce our laws, and we need to take things to court. But at the same time, in a moment of crisis that we're in right now, and somebody told me this, I think it's important to share this analogy. If you were walking down the street with your child, and somebody came up to you out of nowhere and grabbed your child and started running off with your child, would the appropriate response in that situation be, hey, it's illegal to kidnap my child? It's illegal to kidnap my child. Okay, that's true. It's a fact. It is illegal. Just like it's true, we should go to courts, right? It's a fact. But let's be clear here. You would do a hell of a lot more. A hell of a lot more to figure out how to get your kid back. We need to do a hell of a lot more to figure out how to get our democracy back, to get the people back, to get their faith in our system back, to make them want to fight, to make them want to hold on to what so many before us sacrificed. You mentioned before we spoke. You think your grandfather fought in World War II?
He did.
Okay, so did mine. D-Day. Okay? So if we're talking about the sacrifices that those before us, the greatest generation before us, who beat back Nazism, who beat back fascism, right?
Yeah.
That gave us the New World Order we now are trying to hold on to dear life to. Well, let's put this all in proper context. Those are the stakes. Those are the situation. This is the situation that we are in. And so I don't want us in any way, shape, or form to normalize this. I don't want us to act like what is happening is normal. It's not normal. There's nothing normal about it. And I understand, I really do, that the part of the issue here is a lot of people say, it doesn't matter. It's all a game. They're all in it for their own reasons. We're all being manipulated. We're all pawns. And so what happens is you kind of sleepwalk your way into this. Because in your mind, you're like, it doesn't matter anyway who we have in there. Yeah. They're all crooks. Right? And so if that becomes normalized, well then, what happens when somebody gets in there who really can do real damage? And Maybe that individual doesn't even have criminal intent. Maybe it's just, I want to soak up as much power as I can get. I want as much money as I can get. I want as much data and information as I can get for my own benefit. It's a power grab, it's a money grab, it's an information grab, maybe even a land grab. It's just folks leveraging their power to grab as much as they want at the expense of who? They're literally trying to cut Medicaid and cut education and cut SNAP and all this to do what? To do what? Do you know? I'll tell you what. To literally give a tax break to billionaires.
That is part of the legislation. Yeah.
No,
It's
no,
in there.
No. Okay.
It's in there.
It's important to say this, to reiterate this point, because Trump and all those guys, and Republicans in particular, they run on this populist idea that they're for the American worker, that they're going to fight for the American worker. But then they get in there and they just snatch money away from working people to give to rich people and big corporations. This is their crowning achievement. And you say, okay, let's talk about Doge for a little bit, if you don't mind. Doge, they want to go in there and they want to just bang up agencies and deal with fraud. We all agree, maybe not all of us. I'm sympathetic to the argument that government could be too bloated, overly bureaucratic, too much red tape. No question about it. Yeah. But do we break our Constitution to solve for it? Right? Do we let an individual just walk up on in there, give them free reign without any type of actual engagement with the very body, Congress, that created the agencies in the first place? How is that democratic? Where is the transparency? Where is the accountability? Meanwhile, this man is making billions. He's made something like $400 billion since Trump's got, this is Musk I'm talking about, since Trump became in office. He's getting contracts from the Defense Department.
He's holding on to, and I believe this was an Oval Office press conference last week, he's holding on to the fact that the work he's doing is going to cut inflation in 6 to 8 months. And the American people will see the benefit of that. And that
inflation has gone up.
Yes.
Think about that. You could make the argument, putting aside some of the dimensions around the border crisis and the fallout around that, that inflation was one of the major issues for why Trump was able to win, to run on this idea that we're going to solve our economy, we're going to get it right, back to those years where he was the president, right? He made this argument, and yet nothing has been done other than cause chaos in our markets. With this stop and go tariffs, he gets, in some cases, right up to the line, the market begins to crater, back away. Be careful on that one too, because again, I'm not saying this from the standpoint of, it's a fact, but it's interesting that if you have inside information on whether or not a tariff is actually going to be implemented or not, you can make a pretty penny on that, can't you? If you know he's not really going to follow through on this, that is the dynamic that we have to deal with here. We got to make sure, whether it's the tariffs, the impact on our eggs and groceries, nothing has fundamentally changed outside of chaos and increased pricing across the board. So if you won on a message to alleviate people's economic pain, what have you actually done to meet that? Nothing. Can you name one thing? And I'm sorry, I'm asking you questions, but there hasn't been one thing that's been named that he's done that has actually alleviated people's economic pain. That is a profound indictment on what is said on one hand and ultimately accounted for. And I'm speaking a lot to what is happening, but again, let's never forget how we got here. Because we can critique this all day. Yep. And it's important to put a spotlight on it. But let's not lose, or let's not miss the forest, right, for the trees here. Because at the end of the day, we didn't have to be here. It never had to happen. And we sleptwalk our way into this. And our party, in a lot of respects, enabled this. I'm not saying it's all on our doorstep, but we're a part of it. And I think it's important for us to have a real moment of accountability here. I really do.
So you're frustrated, and you got into politics because of the last Trump administration. Said before we started talking, this feels a bit like that, a time of reckoning, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term. It sounds like you have another, I guess, impotence for your voice to be heard here. Does that involve a run for governor?
What you're speaking to in terms of the impetus, in terms of connecting with people, you're right. It is very similar to how I felt when I ran. You know, I was a lawyer for 6-7 years in the corporate space, had never run for any elected position. I'd voted, but I never was involved in any campaigns. Before that, I was a hip hop artist for 5 years, doing, you know, socially conscious, politically conscious music. So very different careers. When I decided to run, I felt compelled in that moment. It didn't even feel like a choice. It felt like I just had to step up, like so many other folks did in their own ways. And I ran in that district, that is a district that is home for me, home for my wife. Our families grew up around, in and around the area. And it felt very purposeful. And it was important in that moment to step up and meet people where they are. The moment that I'm in now, in many respects, feels similar in that I'm looking at the situation that we're in. I'm looking at the state of affairs across New York, across the country. And I feel like I need to be out there more. I need to be engaging more with people. I need to figure out a way to leverage all of my skills and my experience and my know-how to be the best leader that I can possibly be in this moment. So for me, I have to free myself from any kind of restraint. I have to give myself the lane to say and do whatever I ultimately feel compelled to do. So when I say all options are on the table, they're on the table. That level of freedom gives me the chance to do what I'm doing right now, to speak unapologetically. There's a level of freedom that I think every political actor really should have if they want to do their job the right way. It shouldn't be a calculus. It shouldn't be about who you're going to offend within the party, you know, what power, what boss in the party, whatever the case might be. And again, this is a general matter, right? If you can't operate without that level of freedom to some degree, then you're not really able to connect in a real way with the people. And the climate we're in right now, in particular, with the level of distrust that people have, I think that level of freedom is at an all-time demand, is a high. Like people want it more than ever, and they should, because they're tired of it. So in this moment, that's the energy that I feel right now, to put myself in a position where I'm able to meet people exactly where they are on my terms, in my own voice, and make that marriage happen in a way that I can best reflect, to the best of my abilities, what they're going through. And then be about the business of articulating what a way out could look like, what a way forward can look like. That is where I'm at right now. And it's something that gives me great purpose and makes me feel like the work that I'm doing every single day is meaningful.
Have you been approached by anybody to run for governor, whether that's in the party or outside of it?
I have discussions all the time with people who are, I think more than anything, putting aside the specific role, right? What they are looking for is who are our leaders? Where are the voices out there? Where's the next generation of leaders? Where are they going to come from? Just like they came in 2018. The wave of folks that came in 2018, a lot of my classmates, right, were individuals like myself who felt compelled in that moment. And the power of that moment was ushering in that next generation of leaders, I think, too. And I think we're all going about it in our own different ways. And so, to me, this is another version of that, where I think it's just pushing all of us to figure out who we can be in this moment for the people, not for a career. Do I find a lot of fulfillment in service and in politics? I do. I genuinely feel a lot of fulfillment, more so from the people that I interact with every single day. But before I was in political life, I had a lot of fulfillment as an artist in the hip hop world. I have fulfillment providing for my family as a lawyer at a law firm where I was able to do pro bono work around criminal justice reform and juvenile lifers, and do work to learn what it's like to argue in a bankruptcy court. That was meaningful too, but very different. When I ran for Congress, I was able to figure out what gave me purpose and meaning in that space. And now as Lieutenant Governor, I've been able to find meaning and purpose. I share that timeline with you because it doesn't mean for me that in my mind's eye, I have to just stay in politics. I get a lot of fulfillment from it. I derive a lot of meaning from it. But if I'm in it, it's got to be on my terms. And what I mean by on my terms is I got to be authentic to me. And I got to be able to connect with the people in the way that I want to connect with the people. And I want to be able to speak for the people in the way that I want to speak for the people. And the times we're living in right now, in my estimation, require that of our leaders. This is not the time to hide behind anything. This is the time to stand up and stand out, be accounted for, and be heard. And wherever that takes you is where it's going to take you. You can't try to just survive. You got to figure out how to lead. And leaders, in my estimation, lead from the inside out. They have to have something on the inside of them that's pushing them to rally folks around. There are folks who sometimes just want to take everything from the outside, but if you don't have anything inside you, how can you lead? How can you really push the agenda that you think is right for the people if you don't have a vision? And so for me, there's something inside of me that materialized when 2016 happened, that's materialized with 2024 happening. And I'm just very grateful. I really am very grateful to have the opportunity in this moment right now to be able to let that energy connect with the energy that I know is out there with the people.
One last question is, while you consider these options, like you said, everything's on the table. In politics, a potential governor run on the table. Are you okay with staying in your current role for the next year and a half to 2 years in this administration?
So thank you for asking that question. I think I've made it clear how purposeful and how meaningful the work is that I'm able to do right now at this time, right? The communities that I get to engage with, the people that I get to engage with in my role as Lieutenant Governor, everything that I'm giving you right now, the energy, the emotion, the knowledge, so much of that is flowing through me because of my interactions with the people. That's how I'm able to communicate with the emotion that I am, with the clarity that I am. I feel very grateful, man. I feel very grateful to be in this position at this moment in New York. When I came back home from Congress and had to run in an independent election, in the primary, to become Lieutenant Governor, if someone said to me, 2+ years from now, this would be the dynamic, it would have been the furthest thing from my comprehension. Trump back in office, all the chaos going on in our state amongst, folks in our own party and leadership, and where does it all fit in the grander landscape of, federal policies coming down, and the loss of faith across the body politic. But here I am, now in New York, the place that raised me and my wife, the place I love with all my heart, where I went to college, where I got married. Like, to be home and fight this fight now in whatever capacity, to be fortunate enough to have a role, to do my part, I'm very grateful for that. And I'm going to hold tight to that, very tight, because it gives me the opportunity to do this work and hopefully restore people's faith, give them a bit of hope, and inspire them that we can be better, that we can elevate, and we don't have to resort to these destructive practices, which might feel good in the moment. I get it. You know, we all have that feel, not all of us, but I can relate to like wanting to bash something or break something. It just feels good sometimes. But in the end, when it's all said and done, once the emotion passes through you, what are you looking at? Carnage. What you're looking at is just a mess and destruction. There's nothing built. There's nothing left. And that's what I'm afraid of right now. We're letting this destructive energy take hold. And it's making us not able to really communicate anymore, listen to each other anymore, work with each other anymore. Everybody's in their corners, fists up, heels dug in, ready to go. Our children are watching. My kids are watching. Our grandkids are watching. What are they looking at? This is what I think about. And so this is the moment that I process. And so, yeah, that was a lengthy way to make the point. But the point hopefully was made that, I very much appreciate the opportunity to be in this role at this moment for the exact reasons I just laid out, given the stakes of this moment.
Governor, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. Hit the subscribe button right now so you can stay up to date on these news-making conversations about the issues impacting New Yorkers the most: power and politics.